On this edition of Independent Sources, the Australian secret weapon, the debate over a visa that some argue gives Australians an unfair advantage.
Australians make up, I believe, the number is 0.03% of non-US population in the world. And yet, the amount of work visas that we hand out for specialty occupations, Australians get 15% of all total work visas handed out annually for specialty occupations.
And Bangladeshi boom, how two immigrants are engineering the growth of a new enclave in the Bronx.
Now we don't need for Queens or Brooklyn or anybody, because whatever people, I have a Bronx, enough for my event. I can get in 5,000 people to Bronx.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Zyphus Lebrun. It's being called the secret weapon for Australians, a way for immigrants from that country to get an advantage when applying for jobs in the United States. The E3 class of visa was created in 2005 as part of the Australian-US Free Trade Agreement, OFSTA. It's essentially a work permit, much like the H-1B class of visa used by most foreign employees in the US. But unlike the H-1, it can be renewed indefinitely and is thousands of dollars cheaper. Although it's a boon to Australians, it's being seen as a slap in the face to other immigrants who feel that this preferential treatment is unfair. I spoke with the freelance journalist Saxon Baird, who's covered the story for The Gothamist, about the origins of the visa and the debate surrounding it. Saxon, thanks for joining us today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these E3 visas. Let's talk a little bit about the history of these. How did these come into being?
Well, the E3 visa came into effect, went into law in May of 2005. It's actually was about a month after the Australian-United States Free Trade Agreement. The actual E3 visa didn't come into law. I wasn't a part of that agreement, but it was definitely a part of the negotiations as far as everything that I've researched and people I've talked to, and it went into law about a month afterwards. Word on the street in Capitol Hill and DC amongst immigration lawyers and senior analysts for, migration policy and immigration policy is that it was a bit of a quid pro quo for send more troops to Iraq and we'll go ahead and make it easier for your Australian citizens to come here and work in the United States.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the details of this E3. It's a form of work visa, and for the audience, it's likened to an H-1B visa, where folks would have to reapply every 3 years and so forth. What's the difference between the E3 visa and the existing H-1B or work permits?
Sure, yeah, there's a number of differences. One is that it's cheaper. A E3 costs about $270 in fees, while an H-1B can cost upwards of over $2,000, possibly $3,000. Second of all, your spouse, if you have a spouse, is able to come and work. Maybe most of all, the biggest difference would be that it's endlessly renewable. They have to renew, an E3 visa has to be renewed every 2 years, but it's endlessly renewable. Opposed to an H-1B, which my understanding is that there's a 6-year limit, and then you have to spend a year outside of the country before you can come back. Furthermore, there's an expediting process, which allows the E3 to, you could have it within, I believe, 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
And there's no extra cost. And
Right.
if you want the H-1B to be expedited, it costs like an extra $1,200.
Wow. So what are you hearing? In the piece, you talked to a couple of immigration advocates and so forth. What's the word on the ground as regards to the reaction to this from advocates and even from folks on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a negative reaction to it. My understanding is, from people I talk to, is that the E3 is sort of a Band-Aid problem for greater immigration issues. In the United States, immigration and work visas are viewed as a domestic issue. From talking to some senior analysts, they say that in other countries, it's more viewed as like an international issue. So there isn't like necessarily like a negative reaction, but there is sort of this idea that it's more like a Band-Aid issue, and really it's sort of a symptom of a greater immigration problem. But as far as reaction to allowing like Australians or the reaction to Australians having this advantage, I didn't really sense any too much negative feedback.
You also mentioned in the piece, which I thought was fascinating, in this whole process for immigration reform, the Senator Schumer had made this had proposed that similar E3s be given to the Irish immigrants, and that's kind of been put on hold. Do you know if there's been any more movement on that?
Yeah, there hasn't been any more movement. It was wrapped up in a greater immigration bill that kind of stalled in Congress, I believe last year, possibly 2012. There was a lot of things wrapped up in that immigration policy reform bill, and it was stalled. I didn't do a lot of, because I was focusing on Australians, I didn't do a lot of research on the Senator Schumer's proposal. I'm not quite sure why what the deal was with Ireland, but yeah, I know that it hasn't gone through.
Now, so who are these folks that are coming here as regards to the Australians? Are they professionals in the country and so forth? Who are those folks?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good distinction that we should make. That this isn't people who are on a whim wanting to move to New York and just like work at a bar. You have to, I believe the term is specialty occupation. Basically, it's for professionals who either have some sort of background or some sort of educational background in a specific job occupation. But that could be anything. It could be anything from a management position at a restaurant to a lawyer to, environmental policy to finance, et cetera, et cetera.
So what kind of numbers are we talking about? Are we talking about this massive immigration of Australians, or are we talking about something within the range of maybe, 5,000, 10,000 people over the last 7 or so years?
Well, specifically for the E3 visa, there's a 10,500 visa cap on it. It's never been reached. In 2013, a little over 7,000 E3 visas were handed out, and that's slowly, gradually increased since it initially went into law in 2005. So there has been an increase, which never reached the cap. And of course, 7,000 compared to the amount of people in the work, it's not having like a major impact. That being said, Australians are coming here in increased numbers. Each of the last 3 years, over 1 million Australians have entered the United States. Now that obviously includes Australians on holiday, visiting, everything. But yeah, that for the last 3 years, still the numbers speak for themselves. It's over 1 million, in the last 3 years, each. So there definitely has been an increased number. But as far as it affecting the labor market, the numbers are still relatively small.
One of the things that you mentioned in the piece I thought was really fascinating. One woman in the piece said that these E3s were not as easy to come by as folks may have been thinking. But I was reading another piece from the Sydney Morning Herald, and it described the E3s as the Australian secret weapon. In this whole immigration struggle, if you will. Where do you think that it lies? It's obviously sometimes lies in between the...
Right. Yeah, and I think it does lie in between. I think that anytime you're trying to go and work for an extended period of time in another country, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a process. There's going to be a lot of paperwork. People are going to advise you to hire an immigration lawyer. The woman who was quoted in my article, that's what she did. She actually hired an immigration lawyer. She later said she doesn't think he did anything, but nevertheless, just to make sure all the paperwork, all the I's are dotted, etc. So yeah, I think it probably lies somewhere in between. And I think the point I was trying to make in my piece is that not that it's easy to get, but rather it's much easier to obtain than the H-1B. And also, I also wanted to make the point that Australians make up, I believe, the number is 0.03% of non-US population in the world. And yet, the amount of work visas that we hand out for specialty occupations, Australians get 15% of all total work visas handed out annually for specialty occupations with the E3.
Well, good stuff, man. Good piece. Thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Still to come on the show, recasting an underground Serbian punk rock star in the role of his life. Before that, Abby Ishola has some other news.
Thanks, Zyphus. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Homicides are down throughout the city, but the number of shootings has increased. The Amsterdam News reports that this new pattern has some people questioning whether reforming the New York Police Department's controversial stop and frisk practice was a good idea. According to NYPD reports, there were 381 shootings by the end of May compared to 347 the same time last year. During a press conference, Police Commissioner Bill Bratton said an increase in shootings is normal at times and shouldn't be blamed on changes made to stop and frisk. From Gay City News, gay activists are working to get the city to provide more help to gay youth. At a recent rally held in Washington Square Park, gay activists discussed how to get the city to increase the number of beds at shelters available exclusively to gay youth. Currently, there are only 4,000 beds. Activists estimate that 22,000 are needed. Over 40 local and national groups have signed on to the movement, which has been named the National Campaign for Youth Shelter. One organization is providing a safe place for young men in the Bronx to express their feelings. The Point Community Development Corporation is working to assist men from the ages of 13 to 24 to meet in a relaxed environment where they can air out their emotional struggles. Topics such as their goals towards higher education and rap culture will be up for discussion. The community organization got the inspiration to start the group from its existing women's empowerment group, WOMEN. That from the Hunts Point Express. Sunset Park is set to be the home of another major real estate development in Brooklyn. World Journal reports that a group of Chinese developers recently purchased a parking lot on 8th Avenue in the borough for $50 million. They plan to turn the 1.1 million square foot space into a shopping mall, offices, a hotel, and residential units. Raymond Chan, the co-developer whose architecture firm will design the project, said the project will create a strong Chinese presence in the area. He said today's 8th Avenue is like Flushing 15 years ago. The developers will need to prove the project will solve traffic issues and how it would benefit the community. And finally, from the Jewish Daily Forward, Holocaust survivors are keeping their stories alive on stage. Survivors from Poland, Hungary, and Ukraine visited several high school seniors from the Yeshiva of Flatbush, Brooklyn, to act out their stories from the Holocaust. The program is called Witness Theater. It was started in Israel as a way to preserve the memories of the Holocaust. Leaders in the program say the practice is also therapeutic for survivors. Those were just a few headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be back right after this.
Thanks for staying tuned. Immigrants remaking themselves when they come to the U.S. It's a familiar story. The cab driver who was a doctor in his country, or the receptionist who had been a chemical engineer. Milan Mumin shares a similar story. An underground punk rock star in Serbia, Mumin moved to the U.S. and is now driving a cab. What's different is that Mumin's story has been dramatized in a film titled Love Hunter. It's a play on the name of his band, Love Hunters. I spoke with one of the film's producers, Branislav Bala, and Mumin himself about the production. Branislav and Milan, thank you very much for being in studio today.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so let's start with you, Bran. This movie, Love Hunter, tell me a little bit about its origins, why you decided to, you and your brother decided to make it.
Well, both me and my brother have been filmmakers for over 10 years, writing screenplays, trying to get a movie made, and deals were not happening. You know, you have something going on and then the financing falls through, and we met Milan, and he told us about his story. He'll talk about himself in a second, but we just thought this is a great opportunity to do like really a no-budget film that will kind of show to the world, here, these guys are filmmakers, and this is actually an interesting story, or we think. And
right. So Milan, when Bran and his brother approached you, what did you think? You know, whoa, these guys, they want to make a movie about my life?
No, it was a very nice collaboration slightly before, in 2009, when we actually met each other and become really good friends. And I was about to finish my first American album, Asthma Sky, and we actually make a video. They made a video for one of my songs from that album, the song "The Sign Is Back Again." So we find out that we actually work pretty much
well together.
Well together, and I told them. In the meantime, I told them various, kind of crazy situations in a yellow cab that I'd been driving for like 4 years already. before I drove trucks, it was also lots of funny situation back in the days, and we find out that it could be easily we could easily make some movie out of it, and then like few years after that, they came out with some like very serious script, which I liked so much. And so.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to talk to you guys in a second, but now we're going to take a look at the trailer for the film Love Hunter. Yeah.
As I look forward, there is only you and me.
What can we do for you today?
I would like to book studio for a session.
I have an idea. You sing me one of your songs and you cheer me up, and I'll tip you $100.
$100?
$100.
You serious?
Like a heart attack.
You free?
Oh, sorry, I'm off duty.
Love Hunters, Mumin. Jesi to ti?
Da.
Što voziš taksi, a?
A, pomalo.
Što se ne vratiš kući i tamo snimiš album?
Moj detinji san je bio da snimim jedan amerski album. Nisam mislio da ću se ovako jebavati 40 godina i vozi taksi po cijelu noć, ali ne interesujem se da ga završim i to.
I šta onda kada snimiš?
So when are you going to get me the money you promised?
I'll get it tomorrow morning.
Are you going to rob someone?
I pevaš ceo život u ljubavi, ništa ne znaš o tome.
Milan, one of the things that's alluded to here that the audience might not know is that you had a really big career as a rock star in the former Yugoslavia. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, everything starts in 1987 when I was actually 16. That was our very, very first album. We colloquially call it Zero album. We call it There Are No Centuries. And it was, we cannot talk about like real professional, you know, recording and specifically when it comes to presentation of that same album. But it was, I have very dear memories from that time. Of course, it was my very first gigs was back in that days, and it was a very creative period for me. Everything's led to once we hit big, as you said, in 1993 with first, let's say, official album, and since that time we made like more than 10 albums.
Wow.
Few live, one unplugged.
Right. Now, Bran, what kind of influence did Milan's music have, you know, at that time?
Well, it's an interesting combination because it's a very powerful rock music, but if you look at, and it's in English, so for the establishment back home, it was perceived as a rebellious and a way for the youth to kind of have a little more like Western views. But all of his lyrics are actually about love, which is interesting. And when we were looking at how to create a screenplay for the movie, in majority of the films, love story is something that you need to get people involved. So we kind of look at some of the lyrics and try to put together a story that would make sense, that was based on some of his lyrics and some of his experiences. And, you know, we also did some of the psychoanalysis on him.
Right.
So it was, I think, very important for that region. But I think a lot of people, myself included, have the American dream. And for him also coming to America, I think that's kind of the final sign of approval, you know, like Frank Sinatra says, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere in New York, but if you can make it to America, that is kind of like, okay, you've done well for yourself. So.
Now, how long did it take you guys to put this film together?
It happened actually really fast. I think we did the screenplay maybe in a couple of months because me and my brother have been writing for a while. We have like 5 or 6 unproduced screenplays that we were trying to get made for 10 years. So we're pretty comfortable writing. So we wrote this in a couple of months, and we just kept saying to everybody, we're doing this movie and we're starting. So when you have that attitude, people just kind of like jump on. They don't ask details. You know, you don't say, oh, I'm going to be making the movie. You say, no, I'm making it. And although we didn't have any financing, we actually did the social campaigning on the internet, and we raised some money that way, and, you know, borrowed from a couple of people, like the old-fashioned way, like Spike Lee with credit cards, you know.
All right.
But we got it made relatively inexpensively.
Good.
And
Milan, you had to deal with what a lot of immigrants have to deal with when they come to the United States. You know, you're one thing in your country, and you come here, and you have to be something else. In your case, you had to become a cab driver, and you said a truck driver.
Yeah.
What was that?
Sorry for interrupting. That was at the end. Now it's fine being yellow cab driver.
Right.
I was in the moving business for years and driving trucks, and that was other story.
Right. What was that experience like for you, having to be that person in, you know, in Serbia, and how having to come here to be this other person?
I don't know. It obviously suits me very, very well. I mean, I could really deal with that, and it's some completely new experience for me, and it's very good, I guess, for my aventuristic
personality,
spirit, or something like that. And it's obviously, you know, completely enriched my creativity, because it's already I'm here now. I'm here not even 10 years, but we eventually made a movie. I made one album officially, but numerous songs.
So even though you hear
songs, new lyrics, it was very, very, very good for me. Very good for me. I'm like, being celebrity in Serbia means lots of drinking, lots of eating, you know, non-stop partying, having fun, and nightlife. It's very, very, very exhausting down there. So once I'm there, I feel at some certain moment I have to, you know, run away. Here, then again, once I missed that, I'm back in.
I think it also helps because he doesn't have an ego. If you think, oh, I'm going to meet this celebrity, and you know, you're in awe, but he's just like a regular guy. And that, I think, helps, and he kind of looks at everything in a very humorous way. So I think that's a plus, because if you're a lot of taxi drivers you meet, and they're like, oh, yeah, I was a doctor in Bangladesh, and you're like, oh man, I'm sorry. But he actually, I think, enjoys it, because as he was saying, with his creativity, and in the film we actually have that where he's in his head, you know, he's composing while he's driving. So he's actually using that time creatively as well.
Bran, Milan, thank you so much for being with us in studio today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Great. You can learn more about the film and when it will make its New York premiere on the website lovehunterfilm.com. When we come back, building a new Bangladeshi enclave, one family at a time. Finally from us, the Bangladeshi community is one of the fastest growing groups of new immigrants in New York City. Their growth is not in long-established enclaves like Queens. Instead, they're flocking to the Parkchester section of the Bronx. Garry Pierre-Pierre took a ride uptown and introduced us to the two men who are the engineers of the exodus to the Bronx.
Jackson Heights has always been the place if you're trying to find Bangladeshi sari, jewelry, and curry. While you will certainly find these things in that established Queens Bangladeshi enclave, if you hop on the number 6 train to Parkchester in the Bronx, you'll be surprised to find a burgeoning Bangladeshi community there.
When I moved first, because we are only Bangladeshi, about 6 families moved first to the Bronx. At that time was mostly, you know, all different kind of people, black people, Chinese people, white people, and Italian old people. They mostly live in the Pakistan condo that time.
I actively involved in real estate business, and this is my subject. I found that the rainbow of people, like in Bronx, various colors, immigrants, and a lot of potential. The street and house are well equipped, and I think this is very good for living for immigrant and low-income people.
Hussein, a real estate broker, and community activist Shahid have been actively recruiting other Bangladeshis to move into the neighborhood like they did about 20 years ago. Since then, they have promoted the Bronx's lower rent as a major selling point. So far, it appears that the duo have succeeded. Not too long ago, community events needed Bangladeshis from the other boroughs to draw a crowd.
Now we don't need for Queens or Brooklyn or anybody, because whatever people, I have a Bronx, enough for my event. I can get 5,000 people per Bronx.
It wasn't always an easy sell.
When I came this Bronx from Queens, if I go back to the Queens, my friend told me, "You crazy? We moved to the Bronx?" Well, my friend, I moved because I got a cheaper apartment over there. Oh, still, my friend, he can do the Bronx. Then I got a vision of what I got to do, how I can change the Bronx, how I can change my community and can interest in the Bronx.
The growth of the Bronx community is only part of the increasing population in the city. According to the New York City Planning Department, Bangladesh ranks 11th among groups of foreign-born populations. From 2000 to 2011, their numbers grew from 42,000 residents to 74,000.
Partly it started with diversity visas, which were a program introduced in the early 90s to allow immigrants to come from countries that previously had very low numbers, and I guess that created the seeds of a larger immigration, because once you had some people here, they were able then to send for their family members. So the numbers and people are coming to New York looking to do better, to make more money. Many of the Bangladeshis are highly educated, not all, but some are. So I think that's what's going on.
Bangladeshi leaders are positioning the community for the next step, mainstream politics.
Actually, mostly Bangladeshi people, they are very conscious in politics. And we love mainstream politics.
To be involved in politics, you have to be a citizen. And so Bangladeshis are relatively new in New York, and I don't have the percentages offhand on how many have naturalized, but I would imagine it's still fairly low. Because they're a new group, their children are very young. So you really don't begin to see a big impact politically until you get a large number who are naturalized, and even more have children who've grown up, born here, grown up, and can vote. We see that for other groups, but I think we have to wait a bit for Bangladeshis. And of course, another interesting question is whether they will combine with other South Asians. You know, there are deep divisions, but we wonder, sometimes in New York it brings people together. And the question is, will they unite? Because there are still a fairly small group, you know, compared to, you know, other groups. You know, will they unite with Pakistanis, for example, with other Muslims? Most of the Bangladeshis are Muslims. Yes. Will they unite politically on some circumstances? We don't know yet.
I hope one day we're going to get a leader like Mr. Shahid. We'll have a chance to run for something for city council or like state. So hopefully we'll get something.
For Independent Sources, I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Be sure to catch our new episode in July, when we'll focus on the city's ethnic elderly and the problems posed by the aging population. Till then, be independent-minded.